This is September 9th, 2021, and this is the meeting of the Standing Committee on Solar and Green Building for the Sustainability Commission, City of Palm Springs. And present are David Friedman and Roy Clark from the Commission, and Tracy Sheldon, Patrick Tellerico from the city. So we'll give it just another minute or two to see if Sandra joins.
You might want to ping her just in case she didn't get the last email for the.
I'm going to give her a call real quick.
All right, thank you.
There was no answer and no opportunity to leave a voicemail.
All right, let's move forward. Don't have a quorum, but no official action items, so we'll just do that then. All right, Patrick, you ready to go into the what literally is keeping me up late at night?
Oh, hopefully not, but okay.
It is. So I don't know how much, whether you were able to get a debriefing from David, but I unfortunately did not find the study session particularly helpful. There was a lot of misinformation, the source of which is hard for me to determine. Most of the public comments were, please don't require solar on our cannabis buildings. The ordinance and the presentation that I prepared and went over very specifically says it does not and cannot and will not require solar. All we want you to do is buy clean energy from DCE, SE, or wherever else that you might be eligible to buy it. The King's Garden applicant seemed to indicate, and this is confirmed by Benjamin, that they are in discussion with DCE, and he seemed to indicate that that was not a problem. And he said, don't make me buy solar, but you know, I'm talking to DCE, and that's exactly what the ordinance is all about.
Right.
So that was and then the question came from at least one of the planning commissioners, why hadn't Sustainability Commission held a study session with stakeholders in the 5 weeks over the summer when none of the commissions were in session? So I'm not sure how we got where we got, but that's where we were. The only direction that was clear, which was very also clear in the presentation, which is to say next steps is to talk to the stakeholders. So yes, they want us to talk to the stakeholders, but it was very clear saying get better, refine the data, talk to the stakeholders. So that didn't give me anything direction that I didn't already have, because that was clear that that was the next step.
Right.
There was no discussion of timetable. There was no discussion of whether to include the water proposal. There was no discussion of whether to extend this to all commercial buildings as opposed to just the cannabis industry. So I have a draft. I'm not really sure, who's in charge. Is this sustainability? I had understood that this was direction from the planning commission, and our role was essentially to provide technical assistance, and that's what I did. This is not intended to be a sustainability commission sort of initiative. I mean, I drafted it, as you know, in the early 2020, dropped it, when COVID hit and we were moving on to other things. And the reason it's back is that because the planning commission and the city council asked that it's back. Now, Flynn said that because it's not a zoning text amendment, he won't even take it for a formal vote to the planning commission. And I understand where that's coming from, because it's not a zoning text amendment. It goes directly into Title 8, which is essentially the building code section. And also the cannabis, which is Title 5. So I understand, Flynn's position, but then that raises the sort of existential question: who exactly is driving this bus, and what does the bus driver want me to do?
Yeah.
And I do not have the answer to that question. We need to have another meeting to discuss this. Another issue that I think is completely tangential came up from Fred Noble, saying, well, we shouldn't accept the monopoly from DC and SCE, let people buy renewable energy certificates, just like Google and Amazon. And with all due respect to Mr. Noble, I don't think our cannabis, operators are in the league of Google and Amazon and able to determine what would be an appropriate amount of renewable energy, which requires them to retain a consultant and also the city to retain a consultant to, just like the odor consultant, to evaluate the plan, which means there's extra costs, and it's hard for me to know that those extra costs would be, with those extra costs added in, there would be less than simply getting an electric bill, which presumably Veronica can look at an electric bill and see what the plan is, see that it's carbon free from DCE or, the SCE equivalent. But that there was direction to, I've already done the basic research. This is something that I'm fairly familiar with through my DC work, as well as generally following what's going on in the energy field. So I know sort of how the ordinance could be drafted. That's the really easy part, to add a sentence to include essentially that you can get synthetic renewable energy, and I can refer to the Public Utilities Code section. And there's a discussion of how green it should be, and my thought is, if we go that route, it should be no less the green than the DCE currently approved mix, which is 75% in-state renewable, 15% out-of-state renewable, and 10% RECs, which can be out of state, sort of completely not connected to the, we call the Western balancing market. And that's embedded in a section of the Public Utility Code, and it's really easy to refer to 399.16B123 and say that's the mix, and you have to follow that. So that's a really easy part for me to just to draft it. But then is this, how does it work practically, and do we want to add to the burden of the operators and city staff to enforce that? But you guys need to tell me what you want me to do, because as I said, my part would be easy, is to simply, write a sentence into the ordinance.
Right. So my impression from my brief conversation with David about it was that it felt like it was being kicked back to us, as you observed. So I did say that we were planning on doing a session for cannabis facilities here in the near future. And so we could kind of wrap it up with that. So we could kind of combine those ideas and say, here's some examples of great things you could be doing. And by the way, here's something we're thinking about in terms of policy and rulemaking. So I don't think that's a big deal in terms of doing some stakeholder outreach. But I guess my question is, since we started down the road to bring it to the commission, back before things got shut down. Should we kind of keep on that path and present it to the commission at this next meeting and have a conversation about it and get some input from them at least?
That's fine, but what am I presenting? I mean, I really just before the meeting, the Energy Commission sent me the water report, although it's the water report that I have. I have different data points about how much water is actually being used that don't particularly reconcile. I think the best is to go with Mission Springs, and they're not really clear. They have a number, that's their number. It's not really clear how they got to that number, but since they're the ones who are sending the water to the facilities, would probably, it's their problem to make sure that they have water. If that's their estimate of how much water is needed, then we should probably go with that, even if it doesn't necessarily jive with reports from other operators, either in the northern part of the state or elsewhere like Massachusetts and things like that. They're the ones who are responsible for providing the water. So I can go with their estimate. I have an idea. And we can present the potential water savings and then, work with a potential vendor to present sort of how that, what kind of system that would be. I just don't know. My challenge is that I'm spending an awful lot of time learning about an industry that I have absolutely nothing to know about. And as you know, I like to do a lot of research. If I'm going to come up with a policy proposal, I'd like to know the practical impacts and how this works. So, it's been a challenge just to learn about, what are the energy impacts and what are the water impacts. And the city literally does not have any data on that. I did that calculation last night. Mr. Noble said that, well, why are you picking on the cannabis industry? Because it doesn't use that much energy. And at least according to the EIR, and I think that number it's probably ballpark correct. I think the EIR consultant may have come to the right number, scored the right number in a completely wrong way, but one number being higher and one number being lower, it's probably in the ballpark. But just that one facility, as you saw that number, would represent a 10% increase in our commercial industrial GHG emissions. And that's not including any other facility. And the question that I have is that, does the city actually know just how much energy is projected for these facilities to use? Because I think it's a really scary number. And when we're supposed to be reducing our GHG emissions, that's not going to happen without mitigation essentially.
Well, so that's
energy.
That's the other thing that's sort of going through my head is that do we present this as part of that climate action roadmap and say, here is a key piece that we need to implement in order to continue to bring down these emissions? Because quite honestly, I don't think it's an option, right? I think it's a necessity if we're gonna achieve any progress in this.
The conclusion that I've come, but I've had to actually crunch a whole ton of numbers to understand how much energy these things actually use, and it's pretty much the equivalent of having a Bitcoin mine in your city. It's just a ton of energy. The lights are on, they're intensive. We don't know actually what kind of lights people are using. That's another sort of data point that's not in the EIRs, because energy use intensity is based on what lighting you used. Mr. Marshall of King's Garden did mention that he's using LEDs. The Energy Commission suggests that we require it, which we can. That's a reach code, so they would have to approve it. But they kind of would like to see that. They'd like to see probably a stronger, they had a bunch of proposals that didn't make the final cut, but because they were initial proposals, there are data, there are cost effectiveness data. So, just as, my other proposal we'll talk about in a minute, but I have all the data from the state that they clearly would accept if we wanted to go that route. But we need to understand what actually people are using, and I don't have the answer to that question.
Right. My other point is that I think it is broader than just cannabis facilities. It was only cannabis facilities because they asked for cannabis facilities.
Yeah.
But I think when we were talking about this ordinance, it was broader than that. And so
and that's fine. I'm going to have to, and I've got to call in with Katie on a DCE issue, but I pinged her. We were talking at 2 o'clock. We just set that time. And in my last message said, I'll update her. I'm going to need a lot better data from DCE on, opt-outs and opt-downs, and understand who exactly would be affected. I won't say my concern about that is we need to find out who is not already at the DCE table, and then make the decision of, is it worth going after those people? And that's going to be, the cannabis folks are already heavily regulated by the city. And so it's easy. They're subject to substantial state and city regulation. So it's easy to sort of add on this one thing that says you have to buy, clean energy, and to bake that into this thing. For the others, once again, it's easy. The draft is already there, but we need to understand, what practical effect it would have. So I will work with and that's probably a separate stakeholder engagement, because then you're starting to talk about the hotels and things like that. Right. Those would be, my guess is that the largest users are going to be Desert Regional and the hotels. And I don't know if they're already direct access, which means, they're getting energy from wherever they are, and the ordinance, and this was totally legitimate, discussion comment I had with the PBK, is we have to make sure that we don't, break anybody's contracts, because that's literally unconstitutional. So there was a slight tweak in the text just to make sure that if you've already got a contract and it has renewal terms, we're not making you give up on any existing contract. Right. So that's a whole separate discussion and a whole separate set of stakeholders. And I, once again, have even less data on who those people are than I have on the cannabis people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then there's, a question of timing and things like that. So, what we get to council, I think the cannabis part is probably easier to get your hands on, just because when we can see, we know who those people are, and we can literally put them all in a room, and whatever. So
is the new requirement that goes into effect, I guess it's when is it, 2023?
Yeah, the current,
so is that universal in terms of commercial buildings, or is it is.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
It applies literally every building in the, including municipal. The building codes are literally universal.
Okay.
Now, and they are going to, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, but that is just for new construction. So again, we have this gap for existing.
Yeah, and that's the whole, and that is the challenge that the Energy Commission, and that's the reason for the other ordinance that we'll talk about, is that the state realizes that it is not going to get to its 40% goal by 2030 without a more robust program for existing buildings. Right. But the way the energy code is structured, which is literally the Warren-Alquist Act of 1974, so you're talking about Ronald Reagan and Jerry Brown's first term, close to 50-year-old legislation, is that it's really hard to get into that statute. Does have some things with alterations and additions, but you have to be doing a fairly major proposal to get into that. And so that's the reason for that other ordinance. And as I mentioned in the slides, and that was new information that I think I just got, the day before, or that on the day after from the Reach Code team, there will be an existing building energy efficiency potential Reach Code cost effectiveness study coming up sometime probably in the first part of next year. So we can look at that, whatever. So, I mean, I'm happy to present the whole, the ordinance is there. The easy part is already done, and get input from the commission. But I will tell you that there's a lot more work to be done by, and a lot more stakeholder involvement if we literally, take every building in the city and say, you have to do this. And we have to understand what the effect would be. And I need data from at least start with TCE.
Right, cost impact data.
Well, it's a cost effect of just to say, I mean, we know that, on average, we're talking about 10 to 14% currently. Obviously it fluctuates, but it's going to be 10 to 14% more. But once again, we have to understand who is not already, who are the opt-outs and the opt-downs.
Yeah.
To understand that, and so I need that data, at least start with TCE, and then I'll try to get talk to SCE to find out what their products are, because we may find out that most of the opt-outs and opt-downs are actually the smaller users that the ordinance intentionally exempts. And so that's the whole point, is we may find out that either the really large users are on what's called direct access, which means they're buying, and I would not be surprised if the big box stores have regional sort of energy contracts. And then there's desert regional. And I don't know whether they're direct access or what plan there are, whether I can get that data from DC. So I'm happy to take the ordinance as written in the interest of time, because it is what it is, and take that to the commission and say, here's what it is, and what do you guys think? But there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. I've gone as fast as I can, but I focused on cannabis just because that was the study session.
Right.
And honestly, what those numbers are, seeing that may be really about the biggest users in town. There's no way a hotel is going to be using anywhere near as much energy as those folks are.
Okay.
So I'm holding the pen on a policy, to the extent that I'm more than just a technical consultant. I would say is that we should focus on cannabis. We can include the other stuff, but it's going to require a lot more work and a lot more data. And I am concerned about, how many people we want to, the more we add on, the more challenge, the more stakeholder engagement we need to do, the more stakeholder potential opposition there's going to be. Whereas the extent that Mr. Marshall represents other people in the industry, he seems to be fine with going with DCE. And I cannot picture that, I can't speak for city council, but we literally cannot achieve our numbers unless that industry it goes to carbon free.
Right.
Whereas we already have achieved, and that's probably the other point, is that we achieved at least our current numbers with most of the people already on carbon free.
Right. Right. So so maybe what we'll do is we'll present the current draft of the ordinance to the commission.
Yeah.
At the next meeting.
Yeah.
It focuses on cannabis, and we'll explain why. And then we can include the idea of expanding it in our roadmap and kind of present that to council as a possible thing that we would do down the road.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the ordinance can go as written, certainly for, for the commission meeting. My
Yeah.
thought is just to say, here's the ordinance. You can
Mhm.
basically take the ordinance in my presentation and, what we already have for today's meeting.
right.
Oh, hi, Sandra. Sorry about that. I've been
Yeah.
blobbing along. Forgive me, my phone is ringing. Spam call, I'm sure. We can take what you already have
Mhm.
and attach that, and I can say, here it is, and this is sort of, we probably do it in 2 steps, which is to say, first focus on the cannabis industry, and then work on, and then decide whether we get the data for the other ones, for the other industry.
Mhm.
The water section is already there. The city is, the code already requires water conservation. We need better data from that, with the stakeholders, but it's already there. I have cost effectiveness. The Energy Commission seems to encourage us to go in that direction. And we can get a vendor to show up at the stakeholder presentation to talk about efficient water use. That clearly, that I think is something that people are concerned about.
Okay. All right. So after we present it to the commission, and I don't know that we are, I think we're looking to take questions on it, but I don't know that people will have a lot of input on it. Then we would try to proceed with some additional stakeholder outreach.
Yeah.
On that, and then see where that goes.
Yeah.
Roy is wanting to make a comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry to go on with this, but it's been, literally, it has been keeping me up at night.
One thing that should be included in the presentation to the commission this month is the history, where we were right before COVID hit, and what we were thinking of doing at that time, which basically was trying to get all commercial. Things have changed. And also, we have 4 people on the commission who weren't there at that time. So it's important to bring everybody up to speed on.
Yeah, I don't even recall. I'll look at my notes. I don't even remember, Patrick, because I was working with you on that ordinance. I'm not even sure that I even presented the draft to the commission.
No, we were gonna do it, I think, in either March or April, whenever we got shut down. I think we were getting ready to do that.
That was my recollection. So
yeah, so they haven't seen it at all.
Yeah, and I didn't think that they had. But Roy, you raised a good question, is that the economy that I did the initial draft from in early 2020 isn't necessarily, I'm sure we really know some industries doing well, others not, perhaps, the same economy. Whereas the cannabis industry, from all the CUP applications that are coming to the Planning Commission, seems to be quite robust and developing in the cannabis overlay zone.
And that's a change since we were talking about it before.
Yeah. So my thought, Patrick, is, once again, in the interest of time, and I've got the holidays and things like that, is just to include whether you want to have it as a where you, I'll defer to where you will put it on the agenda, whether it's part of green building solar or a separate item. You guys decide that, but just basically take what I've got, take the materials from the Planning Commission that were attached to today's meeting.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine.
It would make sense to put it under new business. I don't think we've covered it outside of the committee.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine. And get input and and note which is already in the next steps, all the work that really is necessary to take this. And then when we get to the next point, which is climate action roadmap, it clearly we can talk about that, but it clearly should be continued covered in that document.
Right.
Because I think and I need to take a look, Patrick, I think it may have been referred to in the draft, in actually not the draft, but what was in the pulled agenda item from what I call COVID day, when the city council pulled everything up. But I believe it was referred to in that document already.
Yeah, I think so too.
The last time we met before COVID was February 2020.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's when I was kicking around the draft and, doing various sort of things, but, I said, it never hit the full commission.
Maybe something in the subcommittee notes from that.
Yeah, probably, but because I think I was talking about saying, here's a draft, but, so I guess the question is, Patrick, is that it would be helpful if we have a sort of working group meeting with David and Veronica and the lawyers sooner rather than later. And that we could at least start kicking around, and maybe planning drops out of this. I don't know, but we need to start, just sort of saying, well, this is what we want to look at. Find out what exactly they want us to do on the recs. I want to sort of make have somebody do a presentation on recs at the industry, thing. I think it's way more complicated than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the planning folks are the ones who came up with that, at the meeting, from a suggestion from Mr. Noble. Said looks good on paper, but and maybe the lawyers will have, particularly Ryan Barron, because that's his expertise. He'll have some input on that. Maybe it's practically easier than I think it is. So, I think the ball is in BBK's court, because there's a whole bunch of emails to Jeff Ballinger proposing times to talk. And as a couple of minutes ago, I didn't have an answer to any of those emails. So,
okay. All right, I'll schedule something for next week.
all right, you saw my availability, or whatever, and obviously it was around our meeting on Monday afternoon.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm sorry to be so long-winded about this, but I'm spending a lot of time, and it's way more complicated than I think that anybody really appreciates. And I've had to learn about a whole industry that I just don't know anything about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never as easy as it looks.
As the drafting was the easiest part, but
right, exactly. It looks like such a simple ordinance, and so there's a lot that goes into it. Okay. All right. Well, that's good for next steps. I'll try to get in touch with Jeff and see what he says.
Great, thanks. He's probably in the building today, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure I'll see him.
Okay, next is another big topic, the inventory and the famous climate action roadmap to City Council. So I don't know whether is that sort of on the glide path for October 28th now?
It is still on there, yes.
All right, that's really good, good news. So I was hoping one of my summer homework assignments was to take our draft from literally last year at this time to look at it and update you, and I just couldn't get to it. I'm sorry, I made a promise. I could not keep it with everything else that I'm doing.
Right.
So do you want me to take that draft and sort of, tweak it and send it back to you for the stuff that at least my section's on?
Yeah, if you could focus on your stuff, and then we can do it like we did last time. I can do around the edges.
All right. I will probably, depending on everything else, I'll try to get to that after I write the committee report, try to get that tomorrow. It's just that next week, because of the holiday, my holiday is already looking pretty tight.
Right.
It's a challenge for me in this part of the year where I'm, in Zoom or YouTube's and they got a lot.
Yeah, are they having any in-person services?
Well, my synagogue in Los Angeles is, because I was there a few weeks ago. I was in LA for the Hollywood Bowl, so I actually went there, and they have a very nice courtyard. So they are able to have outdoor services, vaccine requirement, mask requirement, and everything. But as far as I know, it went off, fairly well. Apparently pretty hot, for Los Angeles standards, it was hot. So people were not happy campers. Even though they were under tents, and other people are having that. But I watched on YouTube, streamed live on YouTube, and then yesterday I went to my old synagogue in New York on YouTube.
Oh wow.
Which is something that I very much enjoyed because I did go to services there for quite a few years.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage of technology, is that you can go to synagogue just about anywhere you want to these days.
Right.
Okay. So I'll work on the draft. There's a lot that's going on. I need to make sure that needs to be updated to reflect, the latest legislative proposals, and in particular the building code, because that's a huge item. To say is that, well, the state is doing this, but there are all these reach codes, and the state is encouraging cities to take, additional action to help the state achieve its goals. So I'll update that.
Okay.
Specifically on the ordinance, that should be included. I can take it also included in the agenda for, I think it has been in the agenda materials for the commission meetings. The numbers keep changing every time I change the numbers from the reach code folks. Yesterday or maybe Tuesday, they said, sorry, numbers that we changed for this past draft for the August 27th draft, we're changing back again.
Oh, really?
So it's a bit frustrating because I'm chasing a bit of a moving train.
And these are their like payback numbers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and sort of initial costs and everything. So the question was whether they include replacement costs, and first they did, and then they didn't, and now they're going back to that. So I have there's an adjustment, at least in the cool roofs. Doesn't make anything that was cost effective not cost effective, but I do need to update those numbers. So I will have that and hopefully the model as well. And that can be included also in the materials for the commission meeting, at whether that's new business or as part of green building, solar green building. But that also, even more, that definitely does need to be part of the climate action roadmap. And I think it already was, because these are numbers that I worked on literally last summer manually before they started to automate them in the web app. So that's included. So I'll tweak that. I'll work with the consultant to get the model. And that should be, I'll have that also for our meeting on the 21st. And then that's drafted intentionally as an attachment to the roadmap. Because I would like council, once again, we need to do lots of stakeholder outreach and everything, but they should see the framework, because unlike the other one, the good news about this one is it achieves city policy. It deals with, I think, the most pressing issue that we're dealing with, which is climate change. And so it's intentionally a climate change adaptation measure, i.e. gets people to insulate their houses so that they're more comfortable and not using as much energy. And the most important thing is that it's cost effective. The challenge, but the state is working on that, whether I have anything between now and then or not, or I can throw in a sentence or two, is that you may recall, and I think it's through DCE, is that there was a phone call we had with the chief folks in the treasurer's office, which is the state financing program, and they're trying to work on a bunch of on-bill financing tools, where essentially you're getting a loan via your electric company, presumably the IOUs, and then it's added to your electric bill, and that's much better than PACE, which just doesn't work all that well, and particularly doesn't work at all in tribal land here in Palm Springs. So I'll see if I can add a sentence saying the challenge is essentially financing first costs for any of the big ticket items, and the state is working on some proposals on that. And
And so I guess my question back to kind of where we put this on the agenda is, let's see. So can you clarify, are we putting forth all of these things? Or was it just a couple of things?
The proposal is the one that's attached to the meeting agenda,
Right.
is that's largely based, and Encinitas is doing something, but that's largely based on the Chula Vista ordinance.
Yeah.
It goes a little bit broader than Chula Vista. There are things that they included that they're, they kind of said, well, we won't really need to do that. There's, it does not have an ADU exception. That's been those are cost effective. So there isn't an exception for ADUs, something that we could potentially require. And that's not in this proposal, although it can go in the climate action roadmap, is electrification of ADUs, which is to say, if you're building an ADU, you don't need to drag a gas line to it, and just make those all electric, because you're not adding a pool, so it's just space and water heating and your kitchen. So that can be reflected. That's not in this proposal because this is all for existing housing. But that proposal is the one that I would like to present, certainly to council, which is, if you're doing a renovation of your house, we need you to make it, more energy efficient.
Right. And so it's all of these things that we would be asking them to do.
Well, let me all of these things. So what? This is another bit of a moving target, and I'll check in with the consultants. I slightly tweaked the language on that. It was how much. It's depending on your permit value. So this is a laundry list, and so the initial version was 1, 2, 3, 4 based on how much your permit was, 10, 50, 25, 50, and 100. What the request that came down from the Energy Commission, which they're working on, again, I saw the draft of that, is it's a point system. So more points will be required for a higher permit value, and more than different levels of points will be assigned to each of the measures, and then you get to choose which ones you want. So it's intended. So that's kind of what's reflected in the current draft, as opposed to X number of measures per permit value. So it's intentionally a menu. So it's not so much that it's all of these, is here's a whole bunch of things, all of which are cost effective, that that you get to choose from.
Okay.
I will see where they are on what the timing is of having those the sort of the point values available. I may not have that by next month in terms of doing that, but we can tweak the text, but that's the objective.
So I guess back to my original question, is there something that we're looking for the commission to do with this? Like, are we ready to present it to them and say, hey, do you approve us going forward with this idea? Or is it just an FYI to say, hey, we're going to include this in the climate action roadmap?
I'm comfortable, I defer to you guys, but this has been kicking around on FYI for a really long time. It's not really going to get any better for the commission. So I think this is a good time as any, is to say, this is really our best shot to fill in the gap for our existing buildings, particularly our existing homes, because we all know that there are a lot more existing homes in Palm Springs than new homes that will get built that will be covered by the energy code. And so this one makes a clear difference. And once again, it hits a whole bunch of, hot buttons of cost-effective GHG reductions, at least to some degree, not so much because the people are already on DCE, but there's a gas and water saving measure in there. And mostly it helps people adapt to climate change. That's probably the biggest message, right? Is our houses aren't insulated, and that's just not going to work anymore in this heat.
Right. Okay. All right. So I think, Roy, this would probably be another new business item if we want to get people to focus on it and take a vote or something.
So I'll work with the consultants today, tomorrow. They already know what the deadline is to get the numbers. Hopefully I'll get the model slightly tweak the text if necessary. But this is as ready as it's going to be to go to the commission. And that, I think, reinforces its inclusion in the climate action roadmap, saying, and I'll refer also to Encinitas, probably in the text, because they're also, this seems to be kind of the flavor of the month in San Diego County, which is fairly equivalent to our areas. Obviously, they don't have the heat that we do, but a lot of the other, kind of housing stock as vintage is pretty much the same. A lot of 50s, 60s housing that needs to get upgraded.
Okay.
So we're talking about climate action roadmap and a piece that will go into the climate action roadmap.
Yeah.
What we've done so far is in the July meeting, we provided the last version of the climate action roadmap, which was provided a long time ago. And really our target is to have it updated and ready for the October 28th council meeting. So clearly we won't have it ready in full for our meeting on the 21st, but we should have it ready for the meeting on October 19th, the commission meeting on October 19th. So what do we need to do?
Right.
September meeting.
Yeah, I can look at it and try and, along with the staff report, and, and we can try and do a sprint to try and get it ready for the September 21st commission meeting. I think there's more work to be done on the staff report because that's more detailed than there is on the roadmap.
Oh, of course.
And the staff report doesn't need to go to the commission next on the 21st.
But there's a lot of other pieces of the climate action roadmap that the whole transportation sector.
Yeah, that needs to be completely updated, and I'm not, kind of deferred. We can talk about that. So, I mean, let me put it this way. I will work on my pieces for both the roadmap and the staff report, and I kind of defer to you guys as to what you're comfortable with to present, if anything, of that for the 21st. I mean, certainly.
Well, I think it actually, Roy, it might be interesting to maybe have a conversation about that with the group, right? So, because it involves some of the discussions that they're having on the bike front.
Right.
And so they might weigh in on that kind of stuff. So, and the pedestrian safety too, I think that's all sort of in there. So I'm wondering if we set it up as a conversation, maybe about some of those other pieces, about what people might like to see in there and that kind of thing, so that would help maybe give us a little bit more direction if we do get some consulting help in between now and late October, that we could maybe have some more questions or provide some more background to them.
I think that's a good approach, and we can talk about the things that we're thinking about and working on, but we really need to keep the climate action roadmap in front of the commission.
Right. Okay. All right, so that's good. So yeah, David, if you can finish your piece, and then we'll take a look at the other pieces and see if we can either tweak them or at least set up a conversation around a couple of items.
And that's also going to be part of the discussion, or actually I'm raising that question. Is that also part of the discussion of our study session on October 5th?
So I think it'll weave into that for sure, because a lot of the things that will end up in the climate action roadmap will end up in the planning document,
okay,
as goals or actions or something like that. So yeah, I think they're all tied together.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I'll try to get between now and tomorrow, get my pieces over, and then, Patrick, you can tweak that, as you want to for the
Commission
meeting. In terms of transportation, obviously, that's the biggest, that's one of the biggest challenges, and
right.
what the city can do. And then, I reflected some stuff on the housing element. So we'll see, where that works out in the general plan update. I'll include if I have any specific sort of notes, or I'll put that in my cover email to you saying, what about this, what about that. So I'll spare that for the right now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. A lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
So the Climate and Energy Collaborative Forum, there's just a lot. I guess the overall message, and I'll try to synthesize it from the in just the committee report. So this is sort of the this is initiative, what's called the Local Government Commission, which is a bunch of cities and counties, obviously not officially state sponsored, but consortium of local officials who are responding to the state's invitation for local jurisdictions to step up to the plate, parallel to what the state is doing on the energy code. There's just a lot of stuff that's going on both with the municipal / county level and also at the CCA level, obviously mostly from the Bay Area CCAs that have been around for 10 years or so, and DC doesn't have those available resources. The key points are clearly distributed energy resources, which is to say solar and battery and microgrids. And I'll get to that when we do DC, because DC is moving on that. Resilience, obviously with the PSPS issues in Northern California, that's clearly an issue. And there was a whole track, appropriately so, on environmental justice and making sure that any policies that are adopted are fully equitable, and and really pushing people to make sure that everybody's at the table and the sort of the stakeholder involvement, and we think about what the consequences are. And I'm onboarding that as part of my proposal, which does have sort of an equity component in it. So those are really the themes. We had about 50 people for my presentation. Regrettably, the consultant was kind of hard to, the guy who's doing the Explorer, he was a bit hard to, he was mumbling and not particularly easy to understand. So the guy from Chula Vista explained what they're doing in their ordinance, and then you've kind of seen that just because that was my the basis for what I've been doing. And then I presented on sort of what we're doing. But those are the main themes. Clearly local jurisdictions are doing a lot right now, and there's a lot of best practices that are available. It's kind of almost hard to keep up with all of them. The challenge is that they're mostly not in the Los Angeles. They're very few of the presenters are in the SCE / gas company territory. We have challenges that the folks in San Diego and PG&E territory don't face, with two utility companies that don't see necessarily eye to eye. And so a lot of cities are moving towards electrification, and so there was discussion of that, but that can be sort of a question for council, but I'm not necessarily going there. Of the bandwidth that's required for that is probably more than we necessarily have. But there was a lot of stuff of what people are doing.
Yeah. Okay.
About that. So that's the that's the thing. I'll summarize just sort of the themes in the report.
Okay.
Okay, EV, I'm going to shut up for a minute and let you talk about EV charger expansion.
Okay. Well, I'm actually excited to report that by the time we talk next month, we may actually have construction underway.
Yeah.
So the two sites that will go forward first are the museum garage and City Hall.
Yeah.
So the goal is to have the museum garage done by early October, so that it would be done in time for Modernism Week fall preview and the opening of the new downtown park.
Yay.
Yes. So that would be the first one, and then that would be followed by City Hall. And depending on the timing of all that, they do the shutdown of this dog park here at City Hall in November for the reseeding. And so I think there might be a chance that we would coincide with that, which would reduce the amount of traffic that we have going through that area. So that would help out a lot. So we'll see, but those two are the first out of the gate.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, let's just see that that's something you do, and that's a solid piece of progress to reflect in the roadmap. So
Yeah,
that's gone from being conceptual to literally shovels of the ground. So that's
right.
That's really good news.
Right.
And then you're working on the other sort of parking lots and things like that.
Yeah, so I think that the other ones, the probably order of the other ones will likely be the convention center, and then the parking lot behind the vineyard, and then the downtown Barristo parking garage.
Yeah.
We're still, for the Barristo parking garage in particular, we have a little bit of a challenge in that location in terms of ADA requirements. So we've got the spots, handicap spots that are on the south side of the parking lot at the entry level. We want to move those over to the north side of the parking garage, and then put accessible EV spaces where those handicap spaces are right now. So anyway, so it could be a lot of moving around down there, and it does cut into some of the spaces that have been designated for the restaurants there. So again, it might be there are some other just added complications for that too. So.
Okay, all right, but at least it's in the works then.
Yep.
And have the issues with SE largely been resolved, or okay, great.
Yeah, they've been really pretty fast and helpful with all the inputs that they've had so far. I think the next big question mark for them is when we do the trenching for the wiring over at the garage and also here at City Hall. They have to do their inspection, and they were giving people like a 24-day turnaround time or something that was really long. So we're trying to hopefully get that in a little faster time frame. So.
Good news. One of the issues, and I can reflect that also, that was in the SEEK programs was improving equitable access to EV chargers. And so I'll sort of mention that, and that potentially can also be on the in the action plan, but that's largely, that would be on private property, and in particular on new developments.
So here's an interesting thing related to EV charging. So we have been requested by a member of the public to enhance our requirements for HOAs and multifamily.
Yeah.
To further allow and or require people to have charging units at those locations. So that's something that we may be looking at down the road to figure out how we might word that. The current ordinance change that we had, the zoning code change that went through last fall, is a little bit lacking. So I think that we need to take another look at that and then also think about existing properties and see what, if anything, we want to do about that.
And yeah, and that's the point, which is to say is that it's a bit of a chicken and egg, because nobody wants to buy an EV because they can't charge it. And
Right.
people say, well, I'm not going to install chargers because no one's going to use them.
Right.
And so the general best practice is if you build it, they will come.
Right. Right.
So there, that probably would be a zoning text amendment, because that's where the parking code lies.
Mhm.
But I'm happy to work with you on that, and David and whoever at planning, because there are various languages, there's a lot of good materials for that.
Right.
And Sandra, I'm sorry, I keep talking. Sandra.
Okay, just kind of real quick, and I know it's a very small portion of the central Palm Springs population, but for the residents of towns, of downtown in my area, particularly in the older kind of historic buildings, well, they weren't thinking ahead to parking, and now with the influx and the expansion and the street expansion of the restaurants and bars and cafes and so on, the precious street parking that did exist, and I don't have a car, but I hear this all the time. There is no parking available for residents. Many of them are older or little kids and working people and that type of thing. So there isn't parking, and much less there isn't anywhere to charge. Even if you could find a place, where do you charge your car if you don't have access to a garage or a portal or some kind of parking facility? So that's a small group, but it does put the kibosh on some aspects of downtown living.
Yeah, that's partly why we were trying to increase the numbers of charging spaces that we have downtown. And so we'll have a few more that are nearby the kind of the heart of downtown. And then if our plans go forward, then we'll have a little bit more on the northern end of that, up by Coffee North, that would be accessible. But yeah, I don't know. We're not really, I don't think we're planning any more public parking.
But I know people around here, they'll just go over and use it at the workplace. They'll
Yeah.
they'll go over and charge up and then come back and park.
Right. Yeah. And do people park on the street mostly?
Mostly.
Yeah.
And even if they have designated parking, and the restaurants and the bars usually have designated parking behind their building and valets. But a lot of people, it was like they're okay about swinging for a night out, but they don't want to pay the valet, and then they take up the precious parking until 2 a.m. So anybody coming and going is going to have to park, who knows, and then hike home.
Yeah. Huh, that's interesting. Okay.
It's a small demographic, but
Right.
for anybody who is looking to move, or some of the expansion with housing downtown, it's a little bit of a problem.
Right.
Yeah. Although that raises the issue that Jim's been trying to raise, which is to say, do we really want, more parking downtown, and should we? And that's an existential question to probably be reflected in the roadmap. Is it, should we be looking at more parking, or alternatively more alternative transportation options so that people don't have to park?
Well, the nice thing with the bus trolley, which was very popular with tourists, it also stopped right at my front gate, which was great, was that your experience, separate from the bus, the city buses, your experience in Palm Springs began on that bus. So you didn't have to park or do anything. It would just take you along. It had a nice kind of tour guide party atmosphere to it.
Yeah.
And it would take you through the downtown loop all the way to Ralph's and back. So that was quite nice. So people didn't have to worry about parking or losing their space. They could bar hop and have a nice evening out. So I know we can't have that right now, but there was a real upside to it, particularly with the people who are out doing entertainment and having a nice night out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can that be put in the climate action roadmap of sort of, and as a transportation, part of the transportation of bring back the buzz? I mean, now that the city's finances are a little bit more stable, my recollection is there was roughly 300,000, the subsidy to Sunline was roughly $300,000 a year, 350.
Right.
And so that's, you know,
Well, it definitely aligns with at least the other concept of having a shuttle from the airport to downtown.
yeah.
Having that run frequently. I think that would go a long way for us to advocate that people not rent cars when they come. I mean, if we could at least get them from the airport. Sandra.
I had,
Somewhere like if say at Mr. Chino, if you could have something organized where you can park your car here in a well-lit patrolled area, hop on the shuttle that comes regularly and it'll bring you back. So you're not going to have to worry about your car being vandalized or being mugged because you have to park off. I mean, realistically, you've parked a couple blocks off the main street. So I think that would be a real plus for people to be able to go out and feel safe and comfortable and protected, and while they're out having a enjoyable evening.
we really don't have a park and ride. That's my challenge now that I'm starting to go back to LA. I mean, fortunately, the downtown Baristo garage isn't time limited, so I parked my car there for 5 days while I was in Los Angeles taking the bus and the bus and train combination. And I just took the Sun line up to Desert Regional from there. So for my 50 cents, now that I'm officially a senior, I got to use the senior discount on Sun line. Thank you.
Also, I know just, locally over with the Lavender Farm in Cherry Valley in Beaumont, that their parking, it was so popular, became a nightmare where people were having to walk 5 miles on a dirt road. So they established a shuttle that was every 10 minutes from the high school. And it just made it a pleasant experience. And again, your experience started the moment you got on the shuttle with the lavender and everything else. It was safe, it was protected, and you didn't have to, climb around dirt clogs, rocks and stuff. So, the beauty of a shuttle and protected parking, I think now is a lot safer.
It looks like the cost for the buzz in 2018 was 356,000.
Yeah, that's the number.
Give you an idea, and I'm sure there's an increase.
If it would come back again. So, I mean, I took it. I would frequently, if I wanted to go downtown, I would just go to the Rouse shop, for just a couple hours. I would park near the abandoned bank building in the Rouse complex and take the buzz, and they're very, very convenient. But so that would be, so that's part, I think, of the discussion of transportation and other elements.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Just real quick, or maybe just even one of those sort of mini shuttle buses like the hotels use to, shuttle their guests back and forth, or like with the airport, something like that, just for the downtown area, I think could, what the buzz was trying to do was also reduce traffic, the drunk driving, and increase business by making it better in all those ways. So if we could find another way other than the buzz to achieve those outcomes, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
How could you not go?
Right. Yep. Okay. Good. What's next?
Solar app launch. So there was a call with the solar app folks with Tasia. I mean, it's ready to go. They're working on adding various features, including battery storage, but it's ready to go. Tasia raised an issue about I think the roof line profiles not being available. And they weren't that comfortable with it, but the solar app folks said that was fairly easy to work around, and there would be an alternative. So you can check with Tasia, but that's something that I would also like to see, and I'll work into the staff report and the roadmap. Is council has already expressed a policy. They already voted in favor of a law that would require this for everywhere in California. So I think they've already made a policy judgment that this is something that's worth pursuing. So it can potentially be piloted, but as I think I mentioned last time, we're being outgreened by Menifee, which is fully on board on this. And I think that that's a very busy, it theoretically reduces city staff time, so saves the city money, saves the solar contractors money because they get their permits, et cetera. So I'm not really sure I understand what the specific issue is. And it is something that I think that will help adopt, will help, as part of the, people to get solar reduced costs, because the research seems to indicate that the biggest sort of cost percentage right now for solar installation is the permitting, and is the permitting costs and other sort of soft costs. The material costs, that may be changing a little bit because of what's happening with China. But the material costs have gone down an awful lot. So we'll see. But that's another. Biden announced yesterday that he wants solar to provide something 40 to 50%.
Yeah, I think it was 50%.
Yeah, 50%. By 2050. So anything that we can do to sort of reflect those policy options would be certainly, I think, something that should be on the table. So I'll put that in at least my sections of the roadmap, and I think council could at least ask the city to identify some vendors. The nice thing is that we have really just a handful of people who do the most of the permits here in town. So I think it's fairly easy to get a group of pilot testers and see how that works. So that would certainly be my recommendation, is that we at least, and apparently we'll work with the city software. I forget which one, Tyler or whatever, that the city.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest question and concern that they had, was the interface with the city systems, or.
But I believe that's, and so Aaron would need to be part of, those discussions, but
Well, today's Aaron's last day.
Oh, okay. All right. I did not know that. Okay. Okay. Well, whoever becomes the IT manager will have to be involved in those discussions. But anyway, it's launching around the country. It is fully live, and apparently, people seem to be, people meeting cities, at least the ones who are in those webinars, seem to be, finding it successful.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Any more takers on home energy?
No takers on home energy. We have continued to get requests around EV charging, kind of business-based EV charging as part of the sustainability scholarship. So we did give out one of those because they inquired before we changed our website to focus more on foodware and things like that. So I think what we may do is just include EV chargers in that scholarship money too going forward, so so that people can still do that.
Yeah.
Because it's important, and I don't want to, disincentivize that.
Okay. So that would be just putting back that piece of the sustainability scholarship. So that would be in the sustainability scholarship. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Katie about, because we're trying to plan the next CAC meeting about what the city can do, what DC can do to help promote the city's the city rebate program. Make sure that that's like whether that can be done as a bill insert or something, because that's clearly an issue. This is an area where, as I said, it's, we'll talk about DC in a minute, but this is probably one of the key areas where the city and DC can help work together in promoting retrofits.
Yeah.
Okay, included in sustainability scholarship. Okay. So quickly on the legislative and regulatory update. On the regulatory side, obviously the energy code approval last month is the big issue. Tomorrow is the last day of the legislative session. So waiting for a lot of balls to drop. And so I'll include in the report sort of what makes it through. Tomorrow, one of the key pieces of legislation, which is I think AB 1395, would be to codify the carbon neutrality by 2045, which is currently an executive order, but not statute. So we'll see what that makes through. And there was a very interesting article in yesterday's New York Times, or today's, I saw it very late last night when I was finally having dinner. Not energy related, but I don't know whether you'd seen these guys from Scour, but it would put labeling requirements for recycling or what's not recycling. Did you see that legislation?
Yeah, it's really exciting actually, because it would eliminate the greenwashing that happens with a lot of those recycling codes. And it would be so interesting to have that in place, because it would really help us out, I think, on the recycling front, to dispel some of those myths. And but it has actually a lot of implications, right? So it would change the nature of what we accept in our recycling system. And so that would be much smaller in terms of the universe of things we would accept. And it'll be interesting to see if it prompts any changes in design of packaging and other sorts of things by industry, because if they are pressed and they're pressed to take those labels off of things, then it might make them rethink how they do their business. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was a really good, really good idea. I remain challenged of trying to look at those codes and, is it recyclable? Is it not recyclable?
Yeah.
Et cetera. So
yeah.
So that would be good. All right, not energy related, but nevertheless, you want me to forward you the New York Times article?
Sure. Yeah.
After the meeting, I'll send that to you, because I sent it to myself, sent the link to myself, and it was a really good article. And you can share the article with maybe you want to include that in the Scour report, Roy. So I'll copy it.
I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, I'll include that. It was a rather comprehensive article in the Times, New York Times, and it's in the LA Times. Okay, all right. So I'll provide a full, more comprehensive regulatory update in the report. All right, DCE, literally after we finish this meeting, DCE is moving forward with an RFP for distributed energy resources. Katie sent me the draft. I'm going to be looking at it like now. And so the objective is for that to be, the RFP to be launched sooner rather than later, in the next couple of weeks. You'll recall we had discussions with David Burdick. So it's kind of, it's not sole source, so he'll bid along with anybody else, but that's the idea, to see what's available. This, and it's something once again I'll talk to Katie about, is would distributed energy, would that help with our with cannabis folks, so that if they do want to put solar, it's at no upfront cost to them, and it reduces their bills. So I'll talk to Katie about that, because I think that the numbers would probably support, at least to some degree, some solar, and it is cost effective in the end of the day, but it's not, there's a limit as to how much they can actually put on the roofs, and because of their their capital structure, it's if we can find a way of giving them the benefit of solar without having them with the upfront cost, I think that's something that we should look at. So, and the other issue, because Benjamin, so we're looking at issues, sort of topics for the next CAC meeting. at the end of the month, and Benjamin suggested, hopefully, and I said that's a really good idea, this company called Home Connect, which will allow you to essentially get paid for not turning on your electric bill, your electricity, your major appliances and AC during a flex alert, which we had another one of last night. So I've asked for a presentation on that. Because I've been curious about it, but not sure how it works with NCCA, and particularly for solar customers. And then going to the retrofits on a longer term basis, and this was a lesson, a module from the C conference, is that SCAQMD sponsored a retrofit insulation program as a mitigation measure for the Sentinel plant, except that it was focused on disadvantaged communities in the East Valley, Mecca, Coachella, thermal area, as opposed to the people who live, next to the plant in Palm Springs. So, I mean, I understand where that was coming from, and with funds limited, SCAQMD wanted to focus on disadvantaged communities, but it's a bit frustrating that the money went 30 miles, east, and not here in Palm Springs. So I've asked DCE to start looking at, how can some kind of that program be replicated here. The energy savings, and I'll try and put that also in the legislative and regulatory update. The CPUC has substantially bolstered funds available for the energy savings assistance program. I think it's like $400 million a year statewide. So that would probably be the biggest pot of funds that may be available. But I'd like to sort of see DCE, because if we do this retrofit program, it intentionally exempts anybody on CARE-FIRA. They are probably the people who need the insulation the most. So we want to start identifying funding that can basically come in and assist them. So that's sort of my, my one of my major equity focuses is to see what we can do to, to provide insulation for people who are not going to be doing, major home renovations.
It just as a general, I think it should be applied to everybody, not just disadvantaged or certain communities. It should be available to everybody, because that general improvement has to happen to everybody more or less at the same time.
Yeah, the ordinance does that, but then there's a question of if you're doing a major renovation, you can afford to pay for it, as opposed to the ESA program. These are programs that are income limited. So it's a combination of finding everyone needs to benefit for it, and for the people who don't have the means to do it, who need it, then we need to identify funds that are available for that to happen.
Sure, but it should, what I'm saying, it should be not like you can afford it, you take care of it. That general support and guidance should be for everybody. If you've got the means, great. If you don't, we still need to get you, up to compliance, and we all need to be. So I think that's great.
Yeah, we don't want to require things that people can't afford, and so that's where we need to identify the funds, that are available. So that's,
I'll make it happy for everybody, so the community and the southern part of the state thrives.
Yeah, so that would be so that's the goal. So I've asked Benjamin to start looking into that, and I'll provide a update to the extent that I can on that. And the DC board meeting is a week later than it's been moved by a week, so it's now the 27th as opposed to the 20th. So I won't have the agenda by the time the commission meeting meets, but I'll at least have a couple of ideas for what's going on there. Okay, September commission meeting. So there's a lot. So cannabis and climate action roadmap and the energy ordinance, those all kind of be new items. And then I'll cover just sort of some of these other matters in just sort of the update report and the committee report.
Okay.
And then Sandra, thanks for joining us. We traditionally, it was moved today because of Rosh Hashanah, but we traditionally have been meeting the first Tuesday of the month at 10:30. Does that work for you? Okay. So we'll go back.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I saw you, didn't hear you, but okay, that's fine. So we'll go back to the traditional, the usual meeting then, and that's been on my calendar. And Patrick, that still works for you? Main Street is over by then?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, that's good. Okay, and that gives me enough time to work on anything, on the report, and then get it done in time for the committee meeting, membership meeting, excuse me. Okay, so I think it's about 11 o'clock. I think we've pretty much, covered a lot. There's just a lot going on right now.
Yep, very much so.
Okay, all right. So expect a whole bunch of emails probably by the end of the day tomorrow. Because I said I don't want things to fall into next week just because I have some limited time. And obviously we got to get the package ready for the commission meeting. So I'll get you my deliverables by tomorrow. And then if you could, Patrick, if I can, have you do a poke in your head into Jeff's office and try to schedule something, because I can't move forward without, further direction on where we want to go on some of these things. So at least we meet sometime next week, and then, and then that can be reflected in, a discussion at the commission on the 21st.
Okay, that's good. All right, so I will stop our recording and we will adjourn.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much then. See you all virtually in 12 days.
All right, thanks.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, bye.
Good day.
Thanks.